Hello. Now, before I move on to the actual points themselves, I might as well show off one of the new features that they're introducing with these captains, and that is, if your captain is the max level, and then it says highest rank. The highest rank was 18, and then you needed 10 million XP to get to rank 19. They have changed that so that the 19th point only requires 300,000 XP now. But if you reach this 19th point, any XP you earn on this captain becomes Elite Commander XP. And this Elite Commander XP you will be able to use to level up other captains. Let's take you can see it here in the bottom left, Elite Commander XP. Commanders with the highest rank earn Elite XP in battles. You can convert this to free XP, or you can use it to level up captains. Now, right now on the test server, this is free. You only need to click the plus here near the captain, and you can select how many skill points you want to use or level this up for. Right now this doesn't cost anything, but I'm pretty sure that this accelerated training will cost something on live. I'd be very surprised if they gave it for free, because this is of course another way to make people spend doubloons, and I would be very surprised if it was free. Anyway, let's level up let's use 800,000 Elite Commander XP here and level up, or actually 970,000, and level up this midway captain from 15 points to 19. So that's one of the newer features that's coming with the XP. Now I'm gonna go over all the captain perks, what they actually do and what they mean, so you will have some sort of basis of explanation later on when I go over what recommended builds I would use. I will show you the recommended builds for all of my ships, but I'll start off by explaining them. Starting off, we have the old situation awareness. It's been added here again, but what this does, it enhances the original situation awareness by letting you know how many people are actually shooting at you. You get a number in this little circle here, and that number shows how many people are currently targeting you. And this is actually surprisingly useful on cruisers, because if you're about to turn around and the number says 3 or 4, then you obviously want to cancel that turn, because you are going to eat a lot of damage if you make that turn. So usually I've been playing around it quite a bit to make people stop targeting me before I execute any sort of turns and stuff, so that people aren't prepared for it. So this one has been quite strong, especially for cruisers. Preventive maintenance, this one has been reduced from a 5-point perk to, well, a 1-point perk now, and it's actually fairly useful for DDs, especially if you don't want to be losing torpedo tubes, if you're running the module that increases your reload at the cost of survivability. Expert loader, exactly the same as in the past. Aircraft servicing expert is now a tier 1 perk, so this is of course nice for new carrier players. They instantly have a good tier 1 perk to pick. Support, direction center for catapult aircraft. This skill is insanely good. This skill is pretty much a must-have for any ship that can launch a fighter plane. Instead of launching, when you press your consumable, you use your consumable and you send up 1 fighter plane, instead of sending up 1, with this consumable you will be sending up 2. It comes at the cost of 20% speed to catapult the aircraft, but that's such a small trade-off, because instead of having 1 you have 2, so you end up intercepting the bombers that come your way faster anyway. You can intercept 2 of them, and you have more spotting around you, spotting random DDs, random torps coming your way, and so forth. So this one is an absolute must-have, and I'm surprised it's a tier 1 perk, because this one is very, very powerful. Dogfighting expert, this one is another pretty good carrier perk to get at the beginning, mostly because the 10% to fighters ammunition is quite nice, but it's not quite as good as this one, of course. Versatility, incoming fire alert, exactly the same as in the past. It used to be a 2-point perk, now it's a 1-point perk. I still don't value it that highly, especially in this patch. And evasive maneuver. Well, first of all, what this does is, after you have dropped your bombs, your planes gain minus 40% detectability, so they become more stealthy. They gain 15% HP, and finally, they lose 30% airspeed. Now this perk kind of seems like someone who has no idea what they're talking about or how to play a carrier has designed this perk, because when you drop bombs, your strike planes already gain 30% speed. So what this perk basically does is it nullifies that perk, and instead gives them HP and reduce detectability, or it nullifies that speed. And you don't really want to do that, because with that increased speed that you gain on bombers, first of all, a lot of carriers use the empty bombers to scout already, so they won't want that. And second of all, the empty bombers are usually faster than fighters, so there's absolutely no point to run this perk. Most of the time, this is going to be a negative, because if the planes do get spotted, by using this perk you allow fighters to actually catch up to your strike planes. So this one is just a complete waste of a point. Absolute waste. And of course, because your airspeed is slower, it means it takes longer for your planes to return back and refuel, which means it will take longer for you to make your next strike, so this will also reduce your effective damage. So this perk is just absolutely awful. I can't recommend it to anything ever. It's just a brain dead perk. I have no idea who designed that one. High alert, now 2-point perk, which makes it a lot more interesting. In fact, on tier 10 battleships, I've been able to reduce my repair to 68 seconds by running this perk in combination of others, so quite a strong perk for 2 points. Jack of all trades, only 5%, but on some builds I found it quite nice. Expert marksman, exactly the same as in the past. Torpedo acceleration is now a 2-point perk. Once again, makes it a bit more attractive since it's much easier to get. Especially carriers will be very happy since they can get these 2 perks very quickly now. Smokescreen expert, formerly known as Fog for the Fog God, or something similar. I haven't really found a good use for this. I think in competitive you might get a use out of it, but I've tried it on Royal Navy cruisers and it was pretty underwhelming, and ultimately it doesn't really seem to be worth the 2 points. The increased radius doesn't seem to be enough. Once again, in competitive, where smoking up teammates is a lot more important and much more used, this might become more valuable, but that remains to be seen. Expert rear gunner, pretty garbage, as in the past. Adrenaline rush, this one is complete garbage. I mean, it gives you 0.1% to reload time of all types of armament for each 1% of lost HP. This bonus is just so small. I mean, if you lose half your HP, let's say 50% HP, you gain 5% reload. And that is such a small... If you have a 30-second reload and using this perk and you have lost half your HP, you're going to be gaining 1.5 seconds faster reload. Not really a big difference, a very small difference in fact. It might have somewhat feelable difference on DDs who already have very long reloads on their torpedoes. Let's say you lose 90% of your HP, so you gain a 9% reload buff on your torps, but even then it's not really worth the points, and very questionable perk, honestly. There are so many better ones. Last Stand, still 2 points as in the past, and still a must-have on pretty much all the DDs. Fire Prevention, this one has actually been buffed to the point that it's first of all, it's no longer 2 points, it's 3 points, so it's more expensive, but they've also made it more viable. The thing here is, under the line you see the maximum number of fire sources on a ship is reduced to 3. Now the important fact here is that one of those fire sources is the superstructure. So in the past, if you don't have this perk, like a normal battleship, you shoot at the battleship, you shoot at the superstructure, where you of course do the most HE damage, because that's where a battleship is the squishiest. Usually you start 2 fires on the superstructure. But if they run this perk, you can only start 1 fire on the superstructure anymore. And trying to start fires on the bow and the bow and the aft is quite hard. It's significantly more difficult to land any HE shells there, and they of course don't do damage either, so you tend to not shoot for those positions. So they have made this skill fairly decent actually. It's become an option, a usable option for tanky builds. Basics of survivability, I feel they put a bit too much on this. It's no longer a 1-point perk, but it's a 3-point perk, but it's exactly the same as it used to be. I think having to pay 3 points for this one is a bit too salty in my opinion, because well, it's exactly the same as the past. I think it was a bit too good for a 1-point perk. I think a 2-point perk would have been pretty optimal for this thing, because I have a really hard time recommending this for 3 points. Torpedo armament expertise, exactly the same as it used to be, very good for carriers and DDs. Emergency Takeoff. This is another one of the new carrier perks, and this one is also pretty brain dead. If this was a 1-point perk, I might be able to recommend this, but a 3-point perk for this thing, seriously? What it does is that you can send your planes up even if your carrier is on fire. Of course, usually you can't do this, but with the help of this perk you can, but you still gain 100% debuff to the time it takes to service your planes. So not only is this incredibly situational, for you must be on fire and you must be unable to repair that fire, so very situational, and even then it's not that good because of that massive aircraft servicing time debuff. If it was without the debuff, maybe then I might be perhaps a bit more interested in it, but because of the debuff as well, 3 points for this thing, no, just no, I cannot recommend it at all. Too expensive. Basic firing training has been buffed. Well, first of all, it's no longer a 1-point perk, but it's been moved to a 3-point perk, but it's also been buffed so that you gain 20% to average damage per second of AA defense. So for pure AA or AA builds in general, this one is suddenly quite interesting or quite usable, because 20% is certainly nothing to scoff at. Superintendent, 3-point, just as in the past, just as useful as in this past. Demolition Expert. Now, as you can see, it affects main battery, secondary and carrier bombs as well, but it's been reduced to 2% from 3%. It's also been reduced from 4-point perk to a 3-point perk, but only being a 2% buff makes it not as easy and as quick to recommend as in the past. Vigilance, still fantastic, 3-point perk, still a great perk for many builds. Fourth tier 4 perks, manual secondaries, manual secondaries basically, still a great perk for certain battleship builds, and now only 4 points, so this is of course fantastic for battleships who want to quickly access this. You'll be able to run manual secondaries a lot quicker, at a lot lower tiers as well. Survivability Expert, tier 4, just as in the past, nothing has changed. HEAP, or Inertia Fuse for HE shells. Now, this one is, I'm having a hard time to recommend this. There are some builds where it's fairly useful, like for example the Akizuki. The 20% armor penetration it gains makes the HE somewhat useful actually against other DDs and such, but you give up so much fire chance. You give up 6% fire chance. So on most of the ships where actually these shells are actually useful, well, on those you give up so much fire chance that I have a hard time recommending it. You're paying so many perk points for this, and I feel like it's simply not worth it in the end, because giving up that fire chance seems so silly when you can just use AP instead of the HE, where the HE can't pen instead. This one apparently is supposed to be buffed to 30%, and apparently right now this also works on carrier bombs, meaning carrier bombs gain better penetration with this one right now, but that's bugged and that's going to be changed. But very questionable perk. I haven't really found much use for it in general. I think the debuff is too strong. 6% is so much. And Air Supremacy. This is a good change, the fact that this is 4 points. You no longer have the issue of fighting 15-point carriers and they have 1 plane more. You can now gain this at like what, 12 points? Something like that. So of course much cheaper, much easier to get. Wait, no, not 12 points. 10 points. Damn, that is actually really quick. So I mean, sorry, I'm a bit tired. But I mean, if you go for a basic build here on the carrier, start with the usual stuff here. Of course, we want our torpedo bombers. Yeah, 11, sorry. No, 10 point captain, you can get it. That is pretty goddamn snifty. I mean, you can get this at what, tier 6, probably tier 7? So that's pretty nice. You get all the basics fairly quickly. Anyway, AFT, for tier 4 perks, still just the same as it used to be, still fantastic on certain builds. Manual AA, once again, also great, hasn't changed at all. Let's cover Concealment Expert first. Well, this is of course also good for DDs and cruisers at lower tier. They're able to access their concealment much quicker. They only need that 10-point captain instead of the 15-point they needed in the past. So that's of course a fantastic buff to them as well. So changing this so that you no longer have to have these 15-point captains to be competitive, these are good things. But then there are the questionable things, like this radio positioning finding. This perk is extremely questionable because of how powerful it is. It is fantastically powerful on ships that can use it, or well, who benefit greatly, and in this case, DDs especially. The problem with this perk is that, well, it works the way it described. It shows you the general direction of the nearest enemy ship. It's not perfectly accurate, but it does give you an idea. It's always on, it has infinite range. And those are the issues. It's always on and infinite range, and I've been using it on my Shimakaze. I use it to avoid enemy DDs because I don't want to fight them, so I can actively avoid them because I've constantly got like this wallhack vision of them. And on Gearings and Khabarovsk and such, I've been actively hunting enemy DDs with this thing by just zooming in on exactly where it points and hunting down enemy IGN DDs and such. And well, the clip that I showed at the start, or well, actually, did I show it at the start? I don't think so. I can link it. I can put it in my commentaries or below in the description. I can put the link from my stream where I use RPF on my Shimakaze to just wreck a Khabarovsk. And the only way to really counter another DD using this is to use it yourself, which is such terrible backwards logic. You need to run this perk yourself in order to be able to counter another DD using it. Now, this perk isn't that useful on battleships and such, but it's pretty much a must-have in my book on any DD, and that's why I don't like it, because it's a perk that's so strong that to counter it you need the perk itself, and that's just terrible design. Anyway, this ended up being so long going through this, so I'll post a vid right after this where I go over my recommended builds, and this one will be more of an overview of what they have done to the builds and how they have changed them. I'll see you guys in, well, the next vid.